Hello and happy Tuesday. I want to start a new series that's a little bit different than my Tip Tuesday videos, which you're probably used to seeing on these Tuesdays. However, I'm going to change the format a little bit to still do the Tip Tuesdays every other week. All right, and so on these off weeks like today, I'm going to start something where I don't quite know the name I'm going to call it yet, but it's going to be just kind of 3 hands of basic strategy, and we're going to talk about the why behind we choose the decisions that we do. All right, so we're going to get into it, kind of talk about that versus the dealer's up card and things like that. But first off, if you're new, this is A1 Blackjack, the channel where I teach you how to count cards fast. So if that sounds good to you and you want to learn kind of why you're doing what you're doing when you're card counting, this is the place you want to be. All right, so the first hand we're going to start off here with is going to be a soft 18 versus a dealer's 2. This is one of the most controversial hands in all of Blackjack. And so, like I said, with these, I'm going to kind of compare it to every single dealer's up card that is possible, 2 through ace. We're just kind of talk through kind of why we do what we do and maybe the math and the numbers behind those decisions, okay? So let's see here, a soft 18. First off, how can we best improve our hand? We can only improve it if we get a 2, a 3, or an ace, all right? If I were to get a 4, that would bring me to 22, which is too many, but since it's a soft hand, I would fall back to a 12, right? The 4 and a 7 is 11, and an ace would give me one more to be 12. So really just 3 cards can improve our hand. However, basic strategy says that we should double down against the dealer's 2 if we're playing an H17 game. All right, we'll also talk here in a little bit about some deviations that might happen with this particular hand, but why should we double this? All right, there's only 3 cards that will improve our hand. So a lot of times when you have a situation like this that says to double and you're thinking that doesn't quite make sense, you want to probably look at what the dealer's up card is, and here it is a 2, okay? So typically a 2 is a decent card for the dealer, right? So the dealer is pretty much likely to make their hand when you have, or when they have a 2 to start with. So why are we doubling this? Well, remember that there are only 3 cards that will improve our hand, but you also have to remember the 10s, right? The 10s will keep us at an 18. So that goes from being 3 to now 4, 5, 6, 7. That won't necessarily improve, but will keep us at an 18 or improve our hand. So now we have, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out of the total 13 possible in a suit. Now that ratio stays consistent throughout the deck, or decks if you're playing a multiple deck game. That's why I'm only using 1 suit here, all the spades in a particular deck. And so because that's over half, it is beneficial to double down. All right, now in an S17 game at 0 itself, the count of 0, you would in fact just stand on your 18 and you would not double down. Now let's talk about some deviations with this particular hand. At any negative running count, there are more, let me pull these back a little bit, there are more low cards in the deck that have yet to be played. And so the dealer is even more likely to make their hand. So because of that, at any negative running count, whether you're playing S17 or H17, you should stand on this and not double down, right? So that is kind of our first hand that we're going to talk about here is the soft 18 versus dealer's 2. Normally it's a double down according to basic strategy, especially in an H17 game, which for a lot of you, I find that most people that watch my channel are beginners, and H17 games are probably the games that you have available most to you, unless you're in a state like Pennsylvania or something that has to play S17, or if maybe somewhere on the Las Vegas Strip if you're a high roller, right? And you are a beginner, but you have a lot of money. So anyway, that said, let's try our second hand. So I'm going to pull these back here and put those off to the side. I think I might use a 7 for a different hand later. And let's talk about now a pair of 5s. Pair of 5s versus a dealer's 9. All right, this is another one that gets misplayed quite a bit. A lot of times people get nervous and they either split their 5s or they hit their 5s, and that is not correct. The correct decision on a pair of 5s versus a dealer's 9 is actually to double down. All right, why? Well, first off, let's address the splitting issue. We do not want to split our 5s because a 5 is kind of a bad starting hand, right? The most common dealers, or well, most common card in the deck is a 10 value card. There's 4 of those. Right? And if I were to pull a couple in a row, or even a 9, or an 8, right? A couple of, you know, a 9, 10 or an 8, 10, something like that, pull just a couple of really high cards, I'm going to bust if I start with a 5. But if I start with a 10 and I double this down, and now I pull like a 9 or a 10 valued card, one of the most common cards in the deck, all of a sudden I'm looking pretty good with that 20. Okay, so we don't want to kind of disrupt that 10 by splitting it. We want to keep it as a 10 and instead just double down. All right, in fact, basic strategy, let's talk about what we should do here. Basic strategy says to never split 5s. We're going to treat them like a hard 10, and a hard 10 is going to be a double down versus a dealer's 2 through 9. All right, so 2 through 9. So 9 is that threshold. If it was a 10 valued up card, I don't have a 10 under there, but if it was a 10, then we would just hit this. So against the dealer's 10, jack, king, queen, or ace, then you turn to just hitting because it's not worth the extra bet out there for doubling down. All right, so that's one where it's more about your hand and keeping it together as opposed to what the dealer has. Now, again, do play basic strategy, and if it's a 10 or higher, you're gonna hit that. Okay, and then the last hand I want to talk about today for our first set of 3 here, get these all straightened out, is going to be a pair of 7s. It's not a, let's put one of these, a pair of 7s versus a dealer's 7. All right, first off, what does basic strategy say about a pair of 7s? A pair of 7s is going to be a split versus a dealer's 2 through 7. All right, so since we have a 7 for the dealer up here, we are going to split this. All right, why? Why are we going to split that? Now, what I've seen a lot in my comments on Instagram and YouTube and things is people tend to say, you always got to assume there's a 10 underneath. And as I mentioned in the last one, there is a little bit of truth to that with, you know, that's the most common card. But should we always assume that? And the answer is no, all right? If you think of these 13 cards here, how many are 10s? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 4 out of 13, that's not even half. All right, that's barely over a quarter. And so should we assume there's a 10 underneath? Not necessarily. But instead of assuming that, so if there was, then we would just push all these hands. But you are actually likely to win more by splitting your 7s as opposed to keeping them together and just hitting that. All right, first off, let's look at what would happen if I did keep this together. All right, again, 14 is one of the worst starting hands, not the worst. A 16 is the worst starting hand because it has the most dealers cards that would, or the most potential hit cards that would bust you. All right, but a 14 is kind of the third worst, right? Because 16, 15, and 14 would probably be the third worst hand. So we want to split that up and get rid of our 14 because you're probably gonna have to hit it. But if we split that now, we're starting at a 7, that's a little bit better. We have probably a couple of cards that we could get here that would maybe improve our hand against whatever the dealer has. All right, so that's one reason, or the kind of main reason we want to split our 7s. If we do that, let me put this back out here. All right, if we do that now, let's talk about the types of cards we could potentially get. So obviously we have to get another card since we are splitting our 7s. And what's going to help us out? Well, every card will improve our hand, but this is, like I said, kind of two-faceted. We need to probably take at least 2 cards here. If I take the only cards that would make me stand if I have a 7 or against a dealer 7 would be a 10, jack, queen, king, or ace. All right, talking about an ace 7 as a soft 18 like we had in that first hand versus a dealer's 7 or 8 is going to stand. Right, and then of course, if I pull a 10 valued card, we're going to stand on our hard 17 versus a dealer 7. All right, but what if I get a 9? A 9, this is probably one of the worst draws you could potentially have if you split this, but a 16 versus 7 is a hit according to basic strategy. So really quick to address another thing that people have commented before, and that is, well, yeah, I'm going to split my 7s versus 7, but then what if I get another card? Now what do I do? Well, you keep following basic strategy. Basic strategy says that a 16 versus a 7 is also a hit. All right, a 15, if I had an 8 versus 7 is a hit, and so on. Now, One reason that we want to split these though is what if I pull a 3 or a 4? Let's say I get a 4 here. Now I'm not going to just hit, but rather I get to double down. So that is a potential benefit of splitting your 7s as opposed to anything else, because you can get more money on the table in a situation like that. Okay, so therefore we're going to split against the dealer's 7. All right, now what about the dealer's part of this? So we know we need to split, but the dealer, this is also very important. If they get a 10, Jack, Queen, King, or Ace, they're done. That's all they can get. Their hand would either stop at a 17 or with an Ace at an 18, and they would quit, right? Our rules on the table say that we're going to stand on all 17s, right? But above that, the dealer would have to stand if they got like an 18 there. Okay, and if it was something lower, like if they pulled a 9, now they have 16, and they would have to hit again, and they are very likely to bust in that situation. Okay, now there are, of course, other cards that they could get to potentially make their hand. However, by splitting, we are likely to either win both or maybe win one, lose one, and kind of push the entire hand. And so that is another reason we want to split these as opposed to standing at our 14. Or not standing, but playing, starting with a 14. Okay, now with all of these hands that I showed you today, the soft 18 versus dealer's 2, the pair of 5s versus dealer's 9, and then a pair of 7s versus dealer's 7, these are, of course, just my opinion, loosely based off math that I see and kind of the conjectures that I am making. So if you tend to disagree, I would love to know what your thoughts are. Maybe I missed something. All right, let us know down in the comments what's the reason that you are splitting these hands or standing or doubling down. Why do you do what you do? And why do you think basic strategy says what it says? So if you like this series, please help me out by giving me a thumbs up and liking this video. I'm going to try to do these, like I said, about every other week, along with the opposite weeks doing those Tip Tuesdays. So until next time, remember, this is A1 Blackjack.